This video is sponsored by me and you. Find out more at the end. The situation I'm about to describe is frustratingly common and frustrating. You're having a conversation with a believer. You're expressing yourself as best as you can, trying to explain your thought process and how it differs from theirs. And you think that you're just about to break through to them. You're this close to getting them to understand what you mean, and suddenly they hit you with a Allahu A'lam, or God knows best. You try to explain to them that you don't necessarily disagree with that, you're just trying to elucidate a contradiction or a flaw in a supposedly flawless religion. But they're not having it. The conversation cannot progress because they're stuck on the phrase, Allah knows best. What you just encountered is called a thought-terminating cliché, otherwise known as a thought stopper or bumper sticker logic. It is a kind of loaded language that serves to end an argument and quickly deal with cognitive dissonance. This kind of cliché is really lousy at convincing a non-believer, but it is excellent at keeping a believer from further questioning and introspection. I titled this video this way because often thought-stopping clichés originate from apologists and promoters of the religion, then they trickle down to the believer. But the average believer is capable of coming up with many of these all on their own, and I know that because I used to do that myself. These thought traps are tremendously easy to fall for and can be challenging to overcome. So I'm not giving you this list to help you ridicule those who use it. I want you to be attentive so that you don't fall for any of these yourself. And so you better understand how and why someone else might use them. So without further ado, I asked and you answered. Here are 3 thought-stopping clichés commonly used by apologists of Islam. Starting with, Allah knows best. Other variations of this phrase include, there are things we cannot comprehend, or who can know the mind of God, commonly said in Christian circles. I suspect that it works because there is some semblance of truth to it. Hypothetically, if an all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-good God does exist, by definition it knows more than you. And as a mere human who lacks access to the bigger picture, you might be misjudging something as negative or problematic when it's actually positive. This line of thinking isn't in and of itself fallacious, but the way it is used absolutely is. It's built on 2 massive assumptions. Number 1, assuming that God does exist in this specific description, and that it is neither evil nor deceptive. And number 2, assuming that it communicated with us through Islam, or your favored religion of choice. Those assumptions are implicitly made by a believer as if they were facts. So when a believer faces contradictions or cognitive dissonance, they're able to shrug them off and delegate the problem solving to God. An unbeliever, on the other hand, isn't capable of doing the same thing. How can we first believe in Islam despite suspicious plot holes and then trust that Allah has the explanation for said plot holes? Of course, the answer, Allah knows best, doesn't satisfy us. And it's not because we're contesting that a hypothetical God that fits the description would know best. We're contesting how convenient it is that suspicious things are dismissed rather than addressed. How can you build trust based on a suspicious story? Because at the end of the day, it's important to remind ourselves that religions are essentially stories, accounts of events that allegedly happened to very special characters. Religions are composed of a layered mesh of stories that were written down and repeated and believed, and we're expected to believe them wholeheartedly without having witnessed them ourselves. And according to these stories, if you find them suspicious and don't believe them, you deserve eternal torture. If you can't trust that Allah exists and that it knows best, you deserve eternal torture. To a non-believer, it's hard to not find this ludicrous and self-serving. And it's worth pointing out that this mental barrier doesn't come up when something is seemingly positive. Believers praise the good things in Islam rather than reserving judgment. Only when something is seemingly critical or negative would they drop the thought and defer the matter to Allah. In a sense, it's an appeal to authority to cover up the cracks in the story, as if to say, you can't know more than God, so how dare you question him? But you don't need to be as knowledgeable as God to notice that something is wrong with claims made about God. Let me rephrase that. You don't need to be a God to question its story. And you can't just submit to every story that claims to be backed by a powerful authority. Otherwise, Muslims would have to believe in Krishna because as mere humans, how could they question such a powerful deity? Are they more loving and compassionate than the hypothetical God of love and compassion? This appeal to authority is not a permanent or robust way to fix anything. It's like those videos where they use ramen to patch up damage on a car. Sure, it looks good, but now there's noodles in my bumper. Sometimes I kind of want to agree that yes, hypothetically Allah would know best. For instance, he would know best enough to engineer a way for Muhammad to immediately put an end to slavery rather than heavily endorsing and partaking in it. So why has Allah left us with our books in our hands, so to speak, trying to make sense of why he legalized slavery and concubinage? In other words, why would God put believers in such a difficult position to begin with? They have to affirm that Islam is perfect despite the imperfections and claim that Allah has the answer to why bad is good and up is down. Isn't Allah capable of creating a truly perfect religion with no debatable flaws whatsoever? Why isn't the story so perfect that nobody would have a reason to suspect any part of it? Well, the answer to that is often the next thought-terminating cliché. It is a test. Let me explain. The apologist means that God didn't create a religion like that because it would be way too easy. These suspicions are a test of your faith. If the religion was so self-evident and free of such tests, then everyone would believe, even the people who don't deserve to believe. That last part is not said explicitly, but I think it is implied. What quality is being tested here? This test favors gullibility and punishes skepticism. It favors those who don't pay attention to details and punishes those who are more detail-oriented and inquisitive. And why is God testing us at all if he knows the results? Now, that's a topic that could be its own video, but all this seems less like a test and more like an active attempt at sabotage. Imagine having a partner who tells you stories with suspicious plot holes. When you ask for explanations, they say that if you love and trust them, you will believe that there's a good reason that you cannot know. You'd find that troubling, to say the least. But to add insult to injury, imagine if the plot holes are intentionally put in by your partner to test how much suspicion you're willing to tolerate. Babe, look, I only made it look like I'm cheating to test how much you trust me. That abusive relationship is the one that we have with a testy God. It punishes justified skepticism and rewards performances of mental gymnastics. And since anyone who doesn't believe the story fails the test, and anyone who fails the test is punished, and anyone who is punished deserves it and is a bad person, effectively, if you don't believe the story, you're a bad person. The Venn diagram is a circle. All the good people agree with the believer and all the bad people disagree. Isn't that convenient? No in-group bias whatsoever. This cliché of it's a test doesn't just come up in conversations with others. A believer can use it internally to soothe themselves when facing a difficult situation or when they witness evil. Before they ask themselves why God would hurt so many of his chosen people with a natural disaster or war or poverty, they block the question by rationalizing hardship as tests. They think that God inflicts suffering on people to test whether they would turn to him and ask him for help. And since God is such a nice guy, he washes away their sins in exchange for their suffering. That rationalization can help people cope, but it can also make them enjoy suffering as their ticket to heaven. Either way, it's a lousy test, since people tend to cling to religion harder out of desperation anyway. The test, according to this twisted God logic, should be to give people everything they need to be happy and see if they still believe in religion. Then he can punish them. But why would God rather see us grovel in suffering than see us content and happy without his mention? And if God can do anything, he can test us without causing harm. So why doesn't he do that? I'm not making the case here that Islam isn't true because of the existence of evil. I'm just pointing out the rationalization often used to justify evil in spite of Allah's goodness. Another such rationalization is the devil or shaitan or iblis being a causer of evil, which segues us neatly into the next cliché. Those are the whispers of the devil. This is typically said to dispel and invalidate doubts and critical thoughts. If you have a nagging question that affects your faith, or if something about the story seems suspicious, that is probably the result of the devil working tirelessly to lead you astray. You don't want to listen to the devil now, do you? In Islam, the devil is an invisible, malicious, and powerful entity capable of influencing your thoughts and actions. He is blamed for forgetfulness, laziness, disbelief, evil, and everything in between. According to the Seerah, the biographies of the Prophet, Shaitan even managed to fool the Prophet Muhammad into reciting polytheistic verses. If you believe this story, Muhammad and his followers committed shirk before Jibreel corrected them. They committed the most unforgivable sin to Allah. The Satanic Verses incident is a story for another day. If you'd like to learn about it and how it went from canon to controversy, I recommend that you watch this video by Religiolog. What's relevant here is that Shaitan is so powerful that he is capable of deceiving Muhammad himself, so it's no surprise that he's capable of deceiving common humans. The devil has a very peculiar role in Islam. He is not more powerful than Allah. Allah can wipe him from existence if he wishes. Instead, when the devil and Allah had a dispute, the devil explicitly promised that he will ambush and deceive humans. And instead of stopping him, Allah basically said, screw it, whoever follows you is going to hell with you. Allah sicked a supervillain on us because, why? Because it's a test, and Allah knows best. Give it a rest. Shaitan is like God's mercenary, hired to do his dirty work for him, or like a lightning rod that deflects all the blame from Allah and addresses the problem of evil in Islam. But it's actually Allah who created Shaitan in his nature, and he gave him powers and orchestrated the whole scenario. It's with Allah's permission, if not his explicit instruction and planning, that the devil deceives you. Now, I don't believe that any of that is actually real, but I'm using it to poke holes in this story. If a Muslim's questions or doubts are the whispers of the devil, why would Allah allow that to happen to begin with? One retort is that good people, aka strong believers, would be immune to that. Again, conveniently labeling anyone who disagrees or thinks differently as innately a bad person or someone who deserves to be misled and then punished. In reality, the devil is a way for people to explain their intrusive thoughts, impulses, moral deficiencies, and faith deficiencies. It's also a plot device that absolves Allah of all blame and covers up holes in the narrative. And in this context, it's a way to dismiss any critical thoughts and get you to question yourself rather than the religion. I spoke about this topic in another video where I make the case that shaitan undermines your trust in your reason and sanity and can lead you to Islamic extremism. You should check it out after this video. What if I concede that the devil might be whispering to me? What can I do about that? Well, I'm instructed to pray more. If I'm not praying 5 times a day already, I should be doing that anyway to avoid going to hell. And if I am praying 5 times a day, I should be doing more. Either way, I should repeat phrases like astaghfirullah, meaning I seek forgiveness in God, and a'udhu billah, meaning I seek refuge in God. And a Muslim is advised to constantly repeat phrases that glorify Allah as they count on these prayer beads. Subhanallah, 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 subhanallah. Okay, maybe it looks a bit unhinged and obsessive, but if it works, it works. So does it work? For a lot of people, no, repeating words does not address the questions they have. But when it does work, it's not because of superstition or because of God. It's because it's essentially brainwashing. Or to put it in kinder terms, it's a repetition of affirmations till you believe them. Step aside, girls with journals and vision boards. Just like feminism, Islam did it first. I'm just kidding. I'm just making jokes. I'm a girl with a journal. Shaitan has no power if you don't believe in its existence. So instead of affirming that shaitan is real, try this one instead. Shaitan isn't real, Allah isn't real. Shaitan isn't real, Allah isn't real. What is real and is worth nurturing is your critical thinking. And what better place to do that than on a channel where the host reminds you at the end of every video to think critically and think for yourself. Initially, I came up with a list of 10 thought-stopping cliches, but given how short attention spans are these days, and since I haven't yet figured out how to put Subway Surfers on the screen, we'll have to continue the list another day. What do you think? Have you run into any of these yourself? And what other cliches would you like me to discuss next? Leave your comments down below. And hit the like button so I can afford to hire an editor. Then it's Subway Surfers all day, every day. A special thank you to all the patrons, YouTube members, donors, and community members for all your support and feedback. I could not do this without you. No, seriously, I couldn't. I'm relying on my own savings and multiple income streams to be able to work on these videos. And the more you support me, the longer I can keep going. So thank you. I really appreciate you enabling me to do this work. And as always, think critically and think for yourself. And consider watching one of these videos next. For every video that you watch, Shaitan loses 1 health point.